Welcome, everyone. If you're new to Nashville Dyslexia Center, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Erin Paskey, and I'm the owner and founder of a private tutoring service to teach students with dyslexia how to read and spell. Take a moment and click subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos we have for you. The dyslexia community is full of amazing people who are passionate about helping families with dyslexia thrive. Today, I have one such person who will encourage you and challenge you today. I'm pleased to introduce Marc Hoffman. Marc has a master's degree in child psychology. He's the founder of Hoffman Educational Group and president of Strong Start Early Learning Center. He's the former chairman of a board of a national nonprofit called Eye to Eye, and he formerly served on the board of Smart Kids with Learning Disabilities. And Marc also has dyslexia and ADHD. Welcome, Marc. Thanks for joining me today.
Aaron, so excited to be here. And I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. The grassroots level work is really the most important. And I commend you for what you've created out in Nashville, and just an honor to be here today.
Thank you so much. Well, let's start today by talking about your childhood years. At age 8, you were diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. So, talk to us about those years and what led up to that diagnosis.
So I like to often reference my earliest experiences with learning as traumatic. Unfortunately, up until around second grade, school was beyond challenging. The educators in my life did not understand neurodiversity. And on some level, having a horrible experience with my second grade teacher led my parents and a principal at the school that I was at to really look for alternative schools that would help me learn how to read. I got evaluated. Um, Unique resources were put in place, which were at the time a luxury, and unfortunately still not accessible for all children. So learning was certainly a journey in the early stages of my life. I was beyond lucky to have two very strong advocates, especially my mother, who was a teacher, fiercely protect my rights in terms of getting a reasonable education.
Parents can make all the difference, can't they?
It's the most important piece.
hmm So, did your parents explain to you that you had this thing called dyslexia?
Yeah, great question. My parents definitely made me aware that I learned differently, and were with being 8 years old and conceptually understanding what it means to not learn like everyone else is difficult to get across to a young child. But I think in the early years, it was more about praising my effort and not the outcome. But certainly, from the very beginning, my parents expected me to embrace the way that I learned. Um, so it was discussed. Dyslexia, the understanding of it, this is roughly 35 to 37 years ago when I was diagnosed. It was not as mainstream. There were not as many people who you could identify with. It certainly existed. It's a biological phenomenon, but um, talking specifically about dyslexia, no. More so in my teen years, but definitely talking about learning differences and um, letting me understand that some things I could do really well with, and other things I would just have to work twice as hard.
What were some of those things that you worked really well, or what were some of those things that were easy for you, or things that come naturally to you, those gifts?
Well, early on, I really enjoyed athletics. I enjoyed quick story, the psychologist that diagnosed me encouraged my mother to get me involved with horses and develop a relationship with an animal that would not judge me. So once a week, I would meet Oki at the stable, and that became a big part of my life early on, where it was a judgment-free environment where me and this horse would just have this experience where I felt agency, I felt good about myself. So I was good with the physical aspects of learning. Um, what comes to mind early on in terms of what I was good at, not very much in school, because school taught me in a very specific way, not in a way that I learned. There was a lot of passive learning until I got to a school for children with language-based learning issues. I started to excel because the instruction was differentiated. And I also had allies in the school. So everyone was coming to the table with a language-based learning difference. That was incredibly empowering. So with my experience around third grade, I did well with pretty much everything, with the exception of math because of working memory issues. It's never been my strength. I love Excel. Excel is a saving grace for me now in my life, but verbally, I was always very talented with most tasks related to school, as long as I was put in an environment that understood the way that I learn and the way I express myself.
Mhm. Well, you mentioned a few moments ago that your parents were your advocates. Talk to us a little bit about how, as a child grows older, they learn to advocate for themselves. What does that look like in the school environment, and how do kids do that?
So if we think about entering maybe kind of the middle school years, fifth, sixth grade, with my mom, we would role play about how I was going to ask for help. So I was expected at a very young age to ask for the help that I was entitled to. And my mother would not, quote unquote, fight my battles. She was definitely there to protect me and ensure that I was receiving an appropriate education. But from a very, very young age, I was expected to initiate the advocacy. And I found that to be difficult initially, but once you get positive experiences, most teachers are thrilled for a 12, 13, for any child to come and say, I'm looking for help. I think most teachers have the best interest of a child at heart. And for a young child to initiate that, they will receive that well, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, it seems to me that all children, regardless of having dyslexia or not, should be trained in how to approach a teacher and say, I'm really kind of struggling with this. I need some help. Can you help me with this? And of course, the teacher is going to say yes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what teachers do.
Yeah.
So, for the parent who is new to this and they want to encourage their child to be an advocate, can you describe a specific instance where a child might approach a teacher and ask for something specific? What might that be?
Sure. So I think an example that often comes up is the um, teacher hands back a graded paper, and teachers are busy. You know, if you have a classroom of 20 children, or upwards of maybe 30 in some school districts, it's difficult for them to sit with every child to go over the paper. But I feel it's definitely doable to schedule some time to sit down and go over what was noted in a paper where you get feedback. So essentially, you're verbally having a conversation with the teacher to understand how you can either do a rewrite or walking through what has been noted in the paper. So that's a very tangible example of something very concrete where you can walk into the teacher's office or just schedule some time to go over it. Logistically, sometimes it's a challenge, but most teachers are very willing to do that.
I would agree. I'm a former teacher myself, and if a child approached me, I would know what courage it took to do that. And of
Yeah,
course, I would make time before school, after school, whenever we could do it so that child would learn the material.
exactly.
Exactly. So you went to a special school for children with dyslexia. Talk to us about what happened after graduation. Where did you go next?
So in sixth grade, I went to a school where it just wasn't the best fit. I think everyone had my best interest at heart, but wasn't structured in a way that best suited my needs. So then I was very lucky in seventh grade. I went to a school in my hometown of Stamford, Connecticut, that was a private school, but had a program for children in the middle school and high school years that had learning differences. So it was a college prep school that embraced neurodiversity. It had children who did not get accommodations and were on quote unquote a standard kind of trajectory in terms of a curriculum. But I give them a lot of credit, the school, King's School, for having a program within the school that accommodated high functioning, bright children with language-based learning issues along with ADHD who could be challenged, had the goal of going to college, but also a culture that understood that me being exempt from a language was very reasonable. But I could also take rigorous college prep classes. So the beauty of the program, and this is a unique model, the teaching within the classroom was taking into account the profile of a child who had a language-based learning issue or ADHD. There was help outside the classroom, but it only supplemented that. It wasn't where you were not getting your needs met in the classroom, right?
Do you have one teacher in particular that sticks out in your memory?
Oh, absolutely. So Mrs. Christensen was incredibly empowering, supportive. She was tough, but loving and caring. She would never accept my initial effort. She always expected me to continue to work hard. She also had a way of demystifying. Notice how I don't use the word disability. She was able to help me understand learning differences. And now that I have a clinical understanding of it, at the time we didn't talk in clinical terms, but helping me understand why a working memory issue can be challenging in a classroom.
Mhm.
So for a 16-year-old to have some type of grasp of the way they learn and then to be able to advocate is incredibly powerful. So Mrs. Christensen, she has edited a version of my book, and I joke with her because she used red ink to edit the book. So, but no, she's a friend for life, and um, teachers are so powerful in terms of how they stay with you forever. I think in life you have hopefully 2 to 3 great teachers, Unfortunately, you also come across some that can influence your self-esteem. I would caution teachers who don't understand dyslexia, ADHD, to take a step back and be careful about how their interactions with a child who's struggling can scar them for a very long time.
I agree. And I have to say, Mark, early in my teaching career, I did not know much about
Sure.
dyslexia or ADHD. And I know looking back that there were a few students that had dyslexia or ADHD in my classroom, and I didn't know how to help. And all I knew was to give more time by keeping kids in at recess. And now I cringe because that's the time that they need to go out and get their energy out and be with their friends and just be a normal kid. But I think most teachers have the best of intentions, but as you mentioned before, they're overworked sometimes. They don't know how to help and they don't understand the nature of dyslexia, which is too bad because so many children have dyslexia. The Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity says that 1 in 5 has dyslexia to some degree. So it's so common that we all should know about it. And so I think that's one of the reasons that I do interviews like these and I want to get the word out is because I don't want that to happen to any more children. I don't want any more kids in Aaron Paskey's classes, so to speak, to go through without the help that they need. And a lot of the outreach that we do is dependent upon people like yourself to tell their story, to share their experiences, and to help us understand things. One thing I would like you to help me understand, um, you mentioned the term learning disabilities and learning differences, and we hear both in the discussions about dyslexia. And I know those terms can be highly personal, but what do they mean to you, and what is the difference between a learning disability and a learning difference?
Sure. It comes down to just neurodiversity. So one of the benefits and one of the things that I enjoy um, greatly with my work, I meet brilliant dyslexics, people with ADHD, and they are achieving authentically, doing what they love, not just monetarily. It could be someone who's working in nonprofit. However you quantify success, they're not disabled. They learn differently, and they have, in many cases, used the way they think in a very powerful way. To me, that contradicts disability. And not everyone has to become Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, or someone who is on a macro level leading many, many people. They can be whatever they're supposed to be in life. But the system possibly where they were educated was disabled. Their brain works fine. They might do certain things well and others are a challenge. So difference is certainly more applicable to my experiences with learning. I think one of the issues, which has gotten a lot better in schools, many are trying their best, but school expects you to be good at everything.
Hmm.
The ones that are rewarded get the straight A's. And that's fine. These are bright people, and I think they're wonderful. The real world, when you get out in the real world, you can master one thing and excel and do great.
That seems very reasonable. I think about myself as a business owner, and you're a business owner too. We don't do everything. We delegate. We hire when there's an area that we don't fully understand. I'm not an accountant. I hire one. I need to do that. So I appreciate that perspective on things that most of us are not terrific at everything.
Right. Most
Yeah.
people aren't.
No, no. Okay. Well, you describe yourself as an educational entrepreneur. Talk to us about what that means.
Yeah. So professionally, my work is centered around um, helping all kinds of kids, not just ones with learning differences, ADHD. The professional niche that I have carved out is an extension of my early experiences with school and learning. Um, so, entrepreneurialism is a perfect fit for me as a thinker. I have created my own conditions when it comes to work. I shouldn't call it work because I would do it if I wasn't compensated. But what I do professionally is I'm intrinsically motivated to wake up every morning and continue to help the kids that we help. Um, so entrepreneurialism with education, I'm just interested in working with people like yourself, working with different organizations to bring awareness, creating for-profit and nonprofit organizations that provide different resources for all kinds of thinkers.
All right. So you are the founder of Hoffman Educational Group and the president of Strong Start Early Learning Center. Briefly describe both of those enterprises.
Sure. So Strong Start is an early learning center for children under 5. So my newborn, who's 12 weeks, will be joining me at our school, our new school in Shelton in about a month. So we have babies all the way up to 5 years old, right before kindergarten. And I often refer to Strong Start as the program I needed. So essentially, I was counseled out of my preschool because I think I was overly aggressive or it just was not working. So it's a bit ironic that now I own schools that are based on exploratory learning. The curriculum is a Reggio Emilia approach to education, and at all levels, it's inquiry based. With the children who are in our program, which we refer to as twos on up, it's referred to as project based learning, which is not specific to young kids. It's done at every level, and if in a very simplified way, there's meaning to what the children are learning, and they need to have a provocation, and that's what they learn about. So go ahead.
Is it similar to the Montessori method?
It has similarities, absolutely, definitely. We want the children to take ownership of their learning, and it's self-directed, and it's powerful, and it's the opposite of passive learning. I would hate to see passive learning for a 4-year-old. That would be but it's not scripted. We would never we would never give children worksheets. They're going to learn their letters, but they're going to learn how to identify the letter. They're going to learn how to use the letter. So it's not passive learning, like I mentioned. And it's great for all kinds of children. It definitely meets the child where they are.
So passive learning would be where a teacher is standing in front of the classroom and just delivers content and the child's expected to listen and take it in. Is that how you describe passive learning?
Absolutely, which makes me cringe. It just brings back a lot of that academic trauma. For me in particular, I think some people can sit there and just take notes and listen verbally, but that's not engaging. And whether you have ADHD or not, there's a lot of research on this. Your attention span is very limited, and when someone's up there lecturing or speaking to you, and there's not sort of a way of engaging the audience, that can be very challenging. So I would hate to see any type of learning like that on a systematic level, but certainly with young children, I don't know how you could do that. They don't really have much of an attention span anyway. So, but.
All right. So that's Strong Start Early
Yeah.
Learning Center. Tell us about Hoffman Educational Group.
So Hoffman Educational Group is now evolved to me doing advocacy work, speaking, where my book will come out of. the early years of Hoffman Education was me working a lot one-on-one with kids, being an academic coach, really have moved away from the one-on-one. And now it's channeling my work regarding, the speaking and advocacy work and working on bringing awareness.
Very good. Well, you mentioned a book. Tell
Yes.
us about this book that you've written.
This book is 6 years in the working, maybe. There's been many versions of the book, and the structure is written for 12 to 15-year-olds who necessarily do not love to read. And the message is about empowerment. It's about success attributes that I've developed that I would love for a young teen to incorporate into their life. And it should not be overly difficult for a good reader, if you want to refer to it that way, to get through very quickly. It's designed for someone who is, either getting the remediation that you provide, is in need of help, where someone could, either a parent, a tutor, a teacher, could read the book with the child. So there's a lot of great books out there. The purpose of my book, where I didn't see this type of resource, is it's very condensed to the point, and it does parallel kind of a workbook that can be downloaded for free eventually on my website. So the book can be used in a lot of different ways. One possibility that I envision is a teacher who is maybe a language arts teacher, whatever it might be, of a class of 7th graders, LD or not, referencing your 1 in 5 statistic, 20% will have dyslexia, but the whole class reads the book and they have a discussion about the concepts in the book, because any child should learn to advocate. Any child needs to understand perseverance and self-awareness, and would love to come and meet with that group of kids. If that's not possible, I mean, can always have a Zoom conversation, but basically it's meant to, on wherever that child is, wherever that parent is in the journey, to give them a perspective of empowerment and some tools to be able to get through.
Let me make sure I have the title correct. It's called Positive Mindset, Self-Awareness and Perseverance, a Success Guide to Thrive with Learning Differences in ADHD.
You got it.
All right. Where can our viewers find your book?
So Amazon eventually. We'll have a link on a few websites where we can, direct you to buy the book. Amazon will be the main way to be able to purchase the book. Also, our friend Simple Word Sigmund can certainly help with that on her website. So I'll be posting. I believe they are the hardcovers. The copies are arriving soon.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I want to close out with 2 additional questions.
Sure.
The first one will be, where can our viewers find you and connect with you? And then I'll have a final closing question after that.
Great. The best way is my website, which is Marc with a C, Hoffman. So MarcHoffman.net. So marchoffman.net.
Okay. And are you on social media?
I am. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we can find you at Marc Hoffman. Okay. And here's my final closing question. What is your best advice to give parents of children with dyslexia?
So I'm going to answer it from two different perspectives. The first is from a practical, everyday, um, let's figure out how we can conserve cognitive resources. Assistive technology um, has been an enormous part of my life, and it's what I wish I had when I was in the early years of school. The use of really at this point pretty straightforward technology, which is so integrated into our everyday lives. And most parents will probably agree that their kids can teach them more about technology than they could teach them. And it's a double-edged sword because there are some downside to the amount of technology in children's lives. But for someone who has dyslexia, ADHD, simply my iPhone, which reads to me, Voice Dream is an amazing app. The Google Calendar reminders for organization, the navigation, just in general. I mean, we could do a whole, chat on this. Embracing it. I have not handwritten anything extensively in probably 15 years. So the use of dictation, spell check, which is so basic at this point. I think about in ninth grade handwriting papers and how inefficient, like to tell that to a 12-year-old, they're like, oh my God, are you joking? So the use of assistive, I wouldn't even refer to it as assistive. It's so mainstream now, many of the types of technology. And then in terms of just the way you parent a child with learning differences, ADHD, is praise the effort and not the outcome. So, early on, I think my mom was just happy if I had grades on my report card. So it was more about what did you do to get this grade? Mm-hmm. It wasn't you have to get a certain grade. It was more about looking at the process. And if we think about it today, that's growth mindset, which has been around for a while. But when I look back to how I developed resiliency and determination, it was that type of interaction with my parents, specifically my mom, where she cared more about the effort than the outcome.
Your parents were terrific parents.
Yeah.
I can just tell. They had, it sounds like they had a long range view in mind of what kind of person do we want Mark to be when he grows up. We want him to work hard. We want him to persevere. We want him to ask for help when he needs it. And it sounds like they realized that the school system might not be a perfect fit for you, but it could be a tool to develop you into the man that you are today.
That's really well said. And learning differences, ADHD was a part of our family culture. It was something that was not shameful. It was embraced. And I was expected to speak out and be an advocate for myself and an advocate for others.
Well, I think it has grown you into someone who is influential and is helping people all around the country. And we are going to have another conversation, Mark, so you can tell us more about your book when it comes out and the assistive technology that you have found helpful. So viewers, I want you to tune in again and hit subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss these future conversations. So Marc Hoffman, I want to thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Aaron. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Take care.